Jim Joyce.
Here we are. Here we are. Number 54.
We typically, you and I do the little wrap up episode, right? So 10 episodes per season, and then we do our 11th. And because we're meticulously unproduced, and our next guest, I just sort of we were texting and said, hey, would you want to be on? Awesome, we would love to. And then I just sort of put him in for May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So, so this is this is season 6, episode 1.
Awesome.
All right. It's so crazy. I don't know. How long do we go, man?
I don't know. I think we're bringing the world through we're bringing ourselves through an interesting kind of evolution here. So I think it's, I don't know. I think once we're vaccinated, once we get to herd immunity.
Okay, now the question is, and I think the guest, I'm sure will touch on it because the different countries are in different stages, right? I mean, US is now opening up. India is just unbelievable what's happening there, right? Sad. But maybe just very quick shout out, because we didn't have a wrap up season. I'm gonna just try to remember. So we kicked off and shout outs to everyone. So 10 people. Let's
love
see
it.
You can get right.
Yeah. Oh,
we had Ritesh, right? I'm just writing it down. Make sure we got 10. We had Andre.
Okay.
On it. Was awesome episode. Michael on the slopes. Michael Dillian on the slopes.
Was he third?
I know you're looking at our YouTube channel, right?
Right. Totally.
All right. Okay, so Zaina, hold on.
Yeah.
She sent me this. Look, read what it says. Take one drink by mouth, repeat until drunk. It's a shot glass that looks like a prescription. And
love it.
The Good Old Promise, The Future of Aging book. So we'll share.
I'm actually dying to read that. I think she said she was gonna try to get me a copy on LinkedIn, but I'll buy one if I have to.
We'll figure it out with her. So our guest is waiting. I'm going to try to flip through Lily Stairs, right?
You had Lily.
Yep.
Yep. With Alex last week, she was closing us off.
Alexander Drain. Yep. Was just full of energy. Oh, Susan Bratton. Food as medicine.
Right.
The misconsumerism of health. Jane. Right. That was just awesome.
Epic.
Meg also just full of energy, and it was great to reconnect with her.
She took us apart.
We're missing one more. Oh, Dr. Von der Wright.
Dr. Von der Wright. Well done.
And I am right. I think we got 10. So
yeah.
With that,
let's bring in the Shri.
The Shri. Let's bring in the Shri.
So this has to be one of my all-time favorite digital health entrepreneur, innovators, brilliant thinkers. Like Sridhar has to be way up there.
Okay. Hey guys.
Of course. Shri.
Hey.
Did you hear what Jim was saying about you?
No, but I probably should drink some scotch before I have to hear it.
It's all elemental. It's all elemental.
I just got from the last season 5. I'm going to show this to you too. It's a shot glass that says "Take one drink by mouth, repeat until drunk."
I love that. Yes.
So I am gonna, since it's the evening here already, I am gonna drink a little. I know it's the middle of the day, but
that reminds me of like the Wolf of Wall Street with Matthew McConaughey, and he says, okay, the waiter comes over, like, okay, here's the game plan. We want 2 martinis, and then wait 7 minutes and give us 2 more, and then cut that down to 5 minutes until one of us passes out. So welcome to Akala Digital Health, Sridhar.
Yes, good to reconnect. It's funny. I don't know if I guess Eugene, you heard that Jim and I reconnected. I think a few weeks ago.
Right.
Because one of our salespeople knew you from years ago, went to the Irish American club or something like that. And it's just
And
a small world.
Those Irish, they stick together.
You actually, Elemental kind of sponsored my my birthday party in Boston. I was coming through. It was a working lunch. I promised big orders.
Yes,
I got a burger and a beer.
nice.
So
are you-
we know.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say we know Shri, but and our millions of listeners and viewers probably don't. Maybe give like your own, in your own words, who you are and
Yeah.
why you're hanging out with us.
Absolutely. So I'm hanging out with you because I was promised free scotch or whiskey. But,
Mm-hmm.
We can make it
Yes.
happen.
so,
Can make
So,
it happen.
all kidding aside, I think yeah, I think Jim, I think you and I met probably 10, 12 years ago through Health Excel. And then Eugene, I think we met a little bit later through Health Excel and
All
did,
roads lead to Health Excel somehow.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah. So for everyone's background, everyone's as introduction, my background. Originally an engineer by training, ended up doing a PhD in biochemistry, and specifically worked on biological and chemical sensors, and more specifically glucose sensors for people who have diabetes. And the work I'd done there was the basis for my first startup that I started with my old college roommate, Sunny Vu, which some people might know him.
I didn't know he was your college roommate. I mean, I knew you guys go way back, but that's
Yep. Yeah. Sophomore year at the University of Illinois.
I thought you guys were like band camp or something, or
No, that's a whole other circle of friends.
But just a comment on that before we go. Like the first venture that I've ever done was with a buddy of mine from high school, and then we were college roommates. It was like, I forget even the name. It was all about e-commerce shopping shit, right?
Yeah.
And we did it literally under our, whatever,
college
in a dorm room. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's funny when you have
Excellent.
relationships and friendships from that long ago, then you can work together well and all that. So. But we teamed up in 2001, and we started our first company together called Agamatrix. And Agamatrix is, it's funny, it's 20 years old, and it's still going strong.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
Agamatrix makes glucose meters.
Did you have more hair then?
I had a lot more hair. And
Okay.
actually, it's funny you say that because there is a tie-in to what we're doing here and my loss of hair at Agamatrix.
Okay.
And so we made glucose meters and glucose strips for people who have diabetes. And today you can, I shouldn't say we, I should say they, because I'm just a passive shareholder now, but Agamatrix makes many of the store brand glucometers. So we make the CVS brand of glucometer, the Target Pharmacy brand, Kroger brand, the Amazon Choice, Amazon Choice brand, I think is what it's called. But our biggest claim to fame is a product that we made that Sanofi took to market, and even today Sanofi, I think, is the company's largest customer. We make all of Sanofi's glucose meters, but our claim to fame was that we made the world's first medical device to physically plug into the iPhone, and it was obviously a glucose meter, since that's all we made, but that caught the attention of Sanofi. And we did a deal with them, and they took it to market under their brand. And we launched that in 2010. So that was very, very early days of digital health. And in fact, it became kind of the poster child. When we used to go to those digital health conferences, you'd see our product on other people's presentations, and it was, it was kind of cool.
Right.
But what really made the company viable and sustainable was actually stuff we did behind closed doors in manufacturing. And so if you're familiar with this industry, you prick your finger, get a drop of blood, put it onto a single-use consumable, and then stick it into a meter. Well, that single-use consumable was made through contract manufacturing partners of ours in South Korea. And just due to the nature of the chemistry, the supply chain, all that sort of stuff, they'd make a batch, And then a month later, we would receive them here in New England to actually do acceptance testing and quality control testing. And so if we saw something in the data today, actually, if it all looked good, fantastic, green light, pack, ship, done. If something in the data looked suspect or looked like there was an issue in production, well, that was made a month ago. And
Yep.
when you're making, 1 to 2 million a day, that's a couple of $1 million at risk. And so over the course of the first couple of years, we had 3 major issues in the factory, and it cost almost $10 million of scrap over the course of that time. And it became very, very clear that we had to get ahead of the curve on this.
Right.
And what people call today as predictive analytics, we just called good engineering back then. And and here was the challenge. This was pre-cloud, pre-AWS, pre-Bluetooth, pre all of this. How do you get data off of machines and instruments and the ambient conditions? Because temperature and humidity had a huge effect on the quality of the chemistry. And so how do you get all that in an actionable way where you can efficiently predict what manufacturing quality might be 2 or 3 months in advance? And so we had to start somewhere. And so we looked around and we said, okay, well, we know temperature and humidity has an effect. So we talked to them. We said, can you just start recording all this? And can you get data from that machine, this machine, this machine? And everything initially was just typed into an Excel spreadsheet and emailed to us. Over time, it became a little bit more semi-automated and became a little more semi-automated on our side. And over the course of about 18 months, we probably had about 15 or 20% yield loss back in those days. After about 18 months or so, we were able to get that yield loss down to below 1%. We were virtually 100% yield because we could see what was going to happen down the road before it became a financial issue. And we could say, hey, stop the presses or do this or do that. And, and that really was the foundation for us being able to compete in what otherwise would be a very crowded market.
Okay.
Did you take that, because the next one, once you guys stepped out, the next one was one of my favorite early tools, by the way, the Misfit, right? Because I remember I was gifting those little things to so many people. My whole family, I think, had them. Yeah, I don't think I knew you back then still, or maybe just met. But but did you take a lot of that off the start when you were starting Misfit? I mean, there's still a supply chain to all of those components, and maybe like, what was the aha moment to actually do the Misfit as a next business?
So there were 2 sort of parallel storylines in the Agimatrix narrative. One was the factory narrative, and this goes back to the point where if I had modern tools, I would still have more hair, because I actually remember spending 53 nights in the same hotel in South Korea.
Wow.
In 2008, I think, 7 or 8. And the reason I know that is I got my loyalty card statement and it said, congratulations, you spent 53 nights. I'm like, that is more than 1 day a week on average.
You obviously weren't married at that stage.
No,
it was like
no, it was I was quite single. And so that's sort of one narrative, that kind of foundation what happened behind the scenes. The other storyline in the Agimatrix was the digital health one, the iPhone connected product. And really it's that inspired the Misfit story, because we had this great vision that, wow, digital health, this is really cool. We can now collect data and we can share it with Runkeeper, MyFitnessPal, the health, nutrition apps, exercise apps, because it all ties into this circle of care for folks who have diabetes. But back in 2010 or even 2009, when we started talking about this, there were 2 major impediments to us progressing this. One was technology, because throwing up a HIPAA compliant cloud was not trivial back then. It's not trivial now, but it's a lot easier now than it was a decade ago. And 2, the ability to share data between apps, that API infrastructure, ecosystem, and structures just weren't there. So everything would have to be a custom integration. And the iOS platform was relatively self-contained, but Android was all over the place. And so we just couldn't do it technologically from in an economically viable manner. the other major barrier was the FDA, because the FDA at that point was very unclear on how they would view data, you know, data from our device, which is a class 2 medical device, how that would be viewed when, let's say, a Runkeeper or a Fitbit app were to take it. And their initial position was, well, if anybody takes your class 2 medical data and stores it, displays it, does anything with it, they will be deemed an accessory to a class 2 medical device and falls under the FDA's purview.
Wow.
And so, you know, when you have something like that, none of these players who are consumer want to really touch it.
Play in that space. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we realized that to really do something in digital health, we had to get out from under the FDA and not be classed as a medical company.
Right.
And, you know, so consumer health and wellness. But the thing that really drove us towards Misfit, and there were two things. One, we knew the Fitbit guys, we knew Jawbone, and, you know, we tried to get in touch with the guys at Nike FuelBand, but they never returned our calls, and for obvious reasons. Yeah. And so we looked at this and we said, well, there's a natural connection between our background in diabetes and exercise and weight loss and all of this. So we gravitated towards fitness trackers because we just saw the market like skyrocket. We said, okay, that's
But by the way, did either of you or Sunny, did either of you have diabetes?
No. Nope.
No. Okay.
No.
So you just had a passion or an interest or an intellectual?
Yeah, it was intellectual because it came out of my PhD work. I was working on how to make glucose sensors more accurate through an algorithmic approach and all that. So I turned around and said, hey, we can build a better mousetrap. So that it was truly an academic intellectual interest, and that's kind of how it.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. So you're on Misfit now.
Yeah. So we're on Misfit, and so we ended up making fitness trackers, and the idea was that, you know, let's do a lot of biometrics. Let's try to capture data from a lot of different parts of the body. And, you know, if you remember the whole quantified self craze that was happening.
It was crazy.
Yeah. Gary Wolf, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Were you on CNBC putting chips in yourself, Eugene?
Oh yeah. Well, I still have. I mean, it's pretty dumb, unfortunately, but I still have the RFID chip inside my hand. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were drawn into that narrative, and when we did our homework, though, we kind of realized that there's 37 very vocal individuals in the world, and once you sold to them, nobody else, the market just kind of dropped off. It was very, very hype driven. But so the quantified self thing, we just said let's wait and see how that turns out. But fitness trackers is more of just a general consumer product.
Right.
So with fitness tracking, we said, okay, let's make a better mousetrap, and we learned a lot of lessons from what we did with the iPhone glucometer around good design and tying in an emotional, getting an emotional response out of a product. And let me give you one example of how we learned this. When we launched that iPhone glucometer, we got letters from parents who had children, 7, 8 years old, and we got a couple of handwritten letters that said they were little Johnny or Mary or whatever is no longer embarrassed by having diabetes because, well, they were the only kids at that age that got an iPhone.
Yeah.
They can plug this into the bottom. So they became the cool kids, and there's like beautiful animation and all this. And when we started getting this kind of feedback, we said, wow, good design can actually influence behavior and have a psychological impact. And do that. And so so that's we poured that perspective into the products at Misfit, which is and I give Sunny 100% credit for this insight, because the problem.
Well, all the other stuff you take credit for yourself.
I give him credit for 99.9% of it.
All right.
The thing that Sunny hit upon, which was what problem are we solving with fitness trackers? Because it wasn't accuracy of step count. Everyone thought, how accurate is this compared to? Nobody cares about accuracy. Because there's no reference. You don't know if it's accurate or not.
Right.
unless you yourself count 10,000 steps a day, which no one's going to do. But the problem we were solving was that of wearability, which is if you don't wear your product, if you don't wear the device, you get zero data.
Right.
So some data is better than no data. And so the thing was, how do you make somebody wear this product all the time? Because if it's not on the body, it's not collecting data. So wearability was the problem we had to solve. And so we looked around and we said, okay, well, we actually thought, the two words were passive or passion. Either we have to make a product that people just wear passively. And like we actually thought about undershirts, just under smart undershirts, or we actually looked at thought about doing smart insoles, because it's always there. You don't think about it. Now the other end of the spectrum is products that invoke passion. So a fancy watch. Nobody needs a watch because you have your phone. It's functionally you can look at time on a phone, but people wear a watch because there's passion involved with it. People wear jewelry because of passion, and so we ended up going that route because we wanted mind share. We didn't want it passive and forgotten. We wanted people to go out of their way to use the product and to wear the product.
Can I comment? I mean, I'm sort of like, you just took me back to my, 12 of those that I bought or whatever, right? But I actually enjoyed, just feedback, not that it matters now, right? But I actually thought because the passion for it, the sleek design, that it's but then the passiveness was also there because it was so light and so like out of the way a bit, right? Even though it was on your wrist. Or am I remembering it? I could have worn it as a necklace too. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's kind of a passive passion. It's kind of like my marriage.
You know we're recording this, right, Jim?
Right.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay.
Just be sure to tag his wife in the hashtags. No, yes. No, but so actually you bring up a very good point, is that with the necklace, what we found, because we did some market research and we tried to find out what's the unmet need. And a very clever way that we did market research, because traditional ways are do a focus group, do surveys, look at your competitors, look online and all this. We went a different route. We wanted to get very, very unfiltered, uncensored feedback, and really like negative feedback about all the other products that are out there. And so we had one of our I believe it was one of our interns spend 2 weeks on Amazon and then read all of the Amazon reviews. And we just said, look, just focus on the 2 and 3 star reviews.
Mm-hmm.
The 1 star reviews are usually just like, my package was late, it was damaged, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, if you're
focus on the worst reviews.
Yeah, focus on all the worst reviews, and then we said, like, categorize them. Yeah, categorize them and tell us what the top 3 complaints are.
That's awesome.
And the top 3 complaints, the number 1 complaint, more than anything else, bear in mind this was like with the Fitbit, Jawbone, and all those sorts of number 1 beyond everything, was people were frustrated with having to recharge their Fitbits every 1 or 2 days. That was number 1 complaint beyond everything. The second most popular complaint was it had to be waterproof. Now, not for swimming, not for showers, for washing machines, because they keep the Fitbit in the little jeans pocket, throw the jeans into the washing machine, forget about it, and then it's gone.
And it gets ruined.
Gets ruined, yeah, because the Fitbit wasn't, it was a little like USB sized little thing.
Right. Yeah.
The first generation Fitbit.
Right.
And then the third one was it had to look good and not be confined to the wrist, because we saw this from a lot of females who were writing these things, is that they wouldn't wear something like bright orange with an evening gown or a dress, or they just wouldn't do that. And they also didn't want to advertise to their friends that they were trying to lose weight. It was seen as a little bit of a stigma,
right?
That kind of thing. If you're an athlete, and that's something else, but we eventually found that our sweet spot were a large part of our user base were females between about 25 to 45 who were just trying to lose 10 pounds. they weren't trying to run marathons or trying to lose a little bit of weight and
Right.
just more active. And they didn't want to advertise that they were trying to lose weight. So that was a big learning.
Wow.
Through all that.
So one quick question on this, and you mentioned, right, you already had Jawbone, which was a lot of pizzazz out there and marketing and all of that, Fitbit, and I'm sure there were a few others that we're no longer even remembering. As an entrepreneur, right, what was like, I mean, competition is always great, but like, did you go, and obviously you didn't know some of these, like the recharging, which is what you made, right, the battery lasts long. You didn't know this until later. So for you two to go in and say, you know what, we're going to go into this, yes, nascent market, but there's already a couple of runaways, and we're going to go at it. What was the thinking there? Like,
yeah, it was all so a very, very good question, because this is exactly what our board and investors asked us. Because originally we were not going to do fitness tracker. We're going to do actually. We were looking at doing smart insoles actually.
Right.
And we pivoted into this, and that is exactly the question the board asked. Was like, "What are you, crazy?" Because this is, you got Fitbit, you got Nike, you got Jawbone. Right. What are you, crazy? So we were actually surprised by that line of questioning, because given where we had come from, the diabetes space, where you had Roche, J&J, Bayer, and all these guys, and we were sued half a dozen times in the diabetes space, and we came into a very crowded market with multiple $100 billion companies with tremendous market share and decades of products on there, huge patent portfolios, and we made it. Now we looked at this and
But sorry, but you guys were running the commoditization play, right? With Agametrics to a certain extent, right? Meaning,
not
no?
Not initially.
Not initially. Okay.
Yeah, the iPhone connectivity.
Yeah. So initially, our whole technology was, twice as much accuracy. We were going for the high-end accuracy at a very, very low cost, because our noise cancellation technology could improve the accuracy of the readings, but it could also correct for manufacturing variations. And that's all, everything that we did was around how to make that signal. So we were kind of playing that. And then the iPhone came out, then we started doing the premium product.
I feel like, I've known you for a long time, but I like this, and I kind of got some of that, but I didn't hear, and I've heard the story, but like the engineer's approach to tackling a market, of like, taking the market apart and saying, what's our, in like looking at the number one complaints. That's fascinating. Like that's absolutely fascinating. Someone who took the time to say, hey, what went wrong with the, as a market entry strategy. It's kind of genius. So running ahead into, do you want to run? I mean, I love Misfit. I could talk about Misfit forever. Like, can I still buy a Misfit?
Misfit still exists as a brand. I think I know Fossil ended up buying it, as you know.
Right.
I actually don't know. I haven't actually been to.
You know what? It's funny. I remember like rooting for you two as the sale was happening, but I was a little bit like, all right, I don't think I'm going to be buying Misfits anymore. Like, because I'm not a watch, like an actual watch person. Like, I'm just not, right?
So he frozen us.
He froze.
But it's funny. I ran into you, Sridhar. Like I remember when when you were starting, we're here at Elemental now. When you were just kind of like getting your pitch together at Elemental, and obviously you were so established because you had the successful Agametrics and the Misfit, and then you were running your idea. You were at that stage of like incubating your idea, and we ran into each other in Boston, and then you kind of walked through your strategy, and then so I got a glimpse into what you're thinking, and then later on when the sale, when the sale was happening or the acquisition of Misfit was happening, I ran into you in San Francisco. Yes. And then you were showing me, and like Fossil was on one side of the company, or Misfit, and then you were starting Elemental. And then I think I ran into you in Dublin as well, or you came to Dublin for a Health Excel thing, and we ran into it. So I got these like lovely little snippets of you walking through this journey.
Yeah. So let me rephrase that. You got lovely snippets of me not having learned my lesson multiple times.
Persistence. Yeah.
No, but they're all tied together, because here's she was sort of the connective tissue. Is that at Agamatrix, getting data off of machines and the environment was just really hard,
Right.
engineering wise, implementation wise. Now we're at Misfit. I'm like, we've got about 1 million people using our fitness trackers around the world. I'm like, this is a global sensor network we've kind of created. And so
Right.
I started thinking about, I can probably just, reskin and repurpose 80-90% of this, and build the products that I wish I could have just bought at Agamatrix at the time, 4 years earlier.
Right.
And Misfit was actually doing quite well in the sort of pure consumer product space, but I was itching to get back into more science and biotech and all that. And I knew full well that I was not going to go back into the lab and create a new molecule or new technology like that. But going back to what you were saying was I was acutely aware of some of the needs in the market. And I said, well, Misfit's actually made 80-90% of kind of what we need. We just need to reconfigure it, and instead of an accelerometer as a motion sensor, I can put whatever, hardware is fairly simple to do. You pop this off, stick another sensor, and there you go. Everything else is there from a hardware perspective.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. No problem. I mean, it is.
Snap it in.
Yeah. But then the sale to Fossil happened, and then I decided, look, let's just create a new venture. And Sunny joined me as a co-founder. He's still on the board, but when Misfit was sold, Sunny had to go and went along with the sale to do the transition. And so we started Elemental with a very simple thesis, which is, hey, let's make it super easy for people to make connected buildings, connected facilities, connected lab. Originally, I was thinking connected factories, because that's who I wanted to sell to. And I'm like, well, let me go talk to the folks in the biotech and life sciences world first, because I know them. I called up friends I knew from the Sanofi days and all these sort of things. I said, hey, what do you think about this? And we had a very simple thesis, which was, if you can start measuring the environment and correlating that to process parameters, there's a lot of insight you can gain, because this is exactly what we did. It was environment correlated to process, and microenvironments, every single workstation, every single, that type of thing. But to do that, it had to be plug and play. And that's something that I learned at Misfit, is the out of the box experience that consumers expect and demand.
Right.
We wanted to bring that out of the box experience to the enterprise space, because generally people don't do that. it's not there. And so that's what we started with. And I would talk to a bunch of folks I knew in the industry, and I pitched the idea to them, and unanimously I heard a very, 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 very simple, very consistent messages, which was, yep, great idea, totally get it, love it, yes, 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 but no, we can't use you until you have ISO 9001, CFR Part 11, or ISO this or ISO that. Unless you have all these things ticked, we can't really use you. You just be an adjunct system that we can't rely on. And they all said, well, but we can't use you in manufacturing, but go talk to our colleagues in the R&D labs, because they have pretty much the same issues, but none or far fewer of the regulatory requirements. So why don't you go talk to them? And so that's what we did. We went and talked to the folks in the lab R&D side, and we actually found a very welcoming market there, and we were welcomed in, and we very quickly embraced by the, not necessarily the scientists who are developing the new drugs and therapies, but really the people who operationally ran the facility, the facilities managers, the lab managers, the operations folks, because they're the ones who needed the data first. And we did what we could to try and sell to the scientists, but they all, I should have known this in retrospect. Makes complete sense. Scientists don't like to talk to salespeople. They like to be left alone. And so
talking to you isn't talking to a salesperson. It's funny. I find that that whole idea of like talking to experts, like scientists love talking to experts, but they don't they're just not interested in the operations of the facility.
No. But the operations and facilities folks turned around and said, we need all your data because we need to make sure the machines are up. We need to, because the scientists complain to us if the temperature is out because their experiment is gone. They complain to us if this is done. They complain to us if this is done. So we found a very nice opportunity in the operations side. And so what we're seeing is this this field of laboratory operations, lab ops, kind of emerging. It's that title is used now. I can go on LinkedIn, I can see some of that, but really, it's people.
Did you guys start the trend? Did you guys hashtag lab ops?
We're doing that now. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this is because right now the majority of people who do this are facilities managers or lab managers, that kind of thing. But what we've seen is this field of what we're calling laboratory operations is going to evolve from lab managers who are saying, look, I need to do maintenance, I need to schedule this, I need to reorder this and fix this and calibrate this. It's expanding into how do I get this data into a central repository? How do I connect all these things up? How do I deal with information security so that everything's moving to the cloud, all the data is going to the cloud, it's all proprietary. And also things like purchasing. How do I know how often somebody has used an instrument? Is it utilization? Do we need to order more? Do we need to retire this? Do we need to do schedule maintenance? And
so when you look at your, like, just thinking about the last companies and you analyze them and you enter this market in a quite considered way, as I would expect from you and Sunny, when you think about this, like, what's the same thing? Like, what's the Yelp review of current lab monitoring technology? Like, or, what's the kind of the massive insight of, like, why do they need you versus, what they're using today?
Yeah. So the nice thing about this space that we're going into is it's you have two really cohorts that are in here. You have folks that have been around for 20, 30 years. And it's I dare say like a Windows 95 kind of a solution. Everything is wired and everything goes to a PC and that kind of thing. They're slowly migrating stuff to the cloud. And then you have folks like us who are cloud first and cloud native. So you come in there, it goes straight to the cloud, everything's API oriented and all this. And so in the last couple of years, there's been a growth of smart lab startups. There's probably a couple of dozen now out there. And when you look at it, the issue is it's very similar to, I know you guys know this company very well, a company called Validic. What did Validic do? And for those who are listening, Validic, I guess 10 years ago, realized that there's an explosion of wearable products, fitness trackers, heart rate monitors, whatever. And getting data off of all of those is not easy. And so they created a unified sort of software platform with the APIs and connectivity with all of these things. So if you, as a consumer of this information, like a Virgin Health, Virgin Pulse, or or United Healthcare or whatever, if you wanted to get data from wearables or fitness trackers, instead of doing connectors for each single one, you just connect to the Validic platform, and Validic does all the work aggregating. So there's a very good analogy with what needs to be done in this space. Except instead of a couple of dozen manufacturers, and maybe 100 or so, a couple of hundred fitness tracker wearables, there's thousands and millions of instruments that are out there that need to be in. So the scale is extraordinary. So
I have 1,000 questions, Eugene, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm like also have probably 999, Jim, not 1,000. But so like I just picture, like the maybe a couple of months ago, I got this Eero, right? Like the Wi-Fi mesh thing, where it was kind of like, boom, plug it in over there, just follow the app, And like to me, I'm just picturing this lab like beakers and this and that. Like, how do you instrument all that with, to your point, millions of different types of devices? Like, do you put like a little, the Amazon Dot kind of thing on it? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So yes and no. We have done that before. We had a customer early on We put RFID tags on everything, and because they had a very defined process, and so when the glassware went through the process, our RFID readers picked everything up and recorded everything, and boom, boom, boom. That was kind of a special case. They had a very specific issue that they were dealing with. But in general, what we realized was it's kind of like the misfit analogy. Some data is better than no data. And so we don't actually need to get into that level of granularity yet. So what we end up doing is we just have a little show and tell. We have little boxes that have a bunch of sensors packed into it, and we just stick them around the building, the facility. We actually put them inside of instruments. One of the most popular places to measure is inside of a cell culture incubator. And again, for those who are watching, why is a cell culture incubator so impressive or so important? It's because it's the workhorse for this entire field of synthetic biology. So, personalized medicine, CAR T therapeutics, lab-grown meat, all of this is about growing cells in culture, and the workhorse are incubators. So the environment matter. It either makes it or kills it. Yeah.
I've heard this thing on synthetic biology. I was just listening to the All-in-One podcast. What is it called? So the guy, your man, who's they call Rain Man there, David, one of the top Silicon Valley guys.
Jason Calacanis and
he's one of his buddies there. Anyway, he was one of the PayPal guys, but he talked about how he was talking about the opportunity for the U.S. to grab.
So first of all, you're listening to our competitors.
Like that's I'm like Sridhar. I listen to the competitors. Yeah. But he was talking about the opportunity for the U.S. to grab the synthetic biology business. Yes. That they could actually start to become like core manufacturers, like when everyone's reestablishing their supply chain right now, that there's this opening. And if I was just in Florida last month, and they were talking about the number of facilities that were moving to Florida, and you would never have thought of that before, like Gainesville or something like that, where they're putting it there. Are you seeing that in your business?
Absolutely. The synthetic biology, field, they were the early adopters of what we were doing. And here's my thesis, my hypothesis as to why that is. And I'll eventually write a blog post about it or something. But when you look at more traditional pharma and biotech companies, if you think about how they were formed, who the leadership was, traditionally what happened was it was a biochemist or a chemist or a scientist would be the founder, the CEO, whatever. They'd be the one who in the driver's seat. And when you look at a very traditional approach to science, it is, I have a hypothesis, I'm going to get data, I'm going to see if this is correct. If it is, I understand it. Then I go to the next value-added step. I do the same thing over. It's very, very linear and serial in its progression. Synthetic biology, if you look at many of the recent synthetic biology companies that have been created, the founders and the CEOs and the guys who are in leadership roles, many of them are data scientists, computer scientists, and engineers. And so what you find in traditional biotech and life science pharma companies, you generally see the science, the scientists kind of running the show. Then they'll hire the statisticians, the number crunchers to crunch data. In synthetic biology companies, you generally see the data scientists and computer scientists kind of in the driver's seat. Then they hire the biologists to gather the data. So it's kind of reversed. Now, why this is interesting is when you approach something from a data science or AI computer science perspective, I'm not saying you don't understand the science, because that's not the right thing to say, but you have a general bias towards looking at things via a correlation lens as opposed to a causation lens. Yeah. So more traditional science is cause and effect. Neural nets and AI is very much fundamentally based on correlation. And what this means is you gather a bunch of data, and if things kind of correlate, it's good enough. I think I know what's happening. We can go to the next step and the next step and the next step.
Interesting.
But to do this, for AI systems to work, you need tons and tons of data. You need very high quality data, and you need it very well structured so it can be data mined and cleaned and all that. So when we showed up with things like this and say, well, we can get data from all this, we had people who buy a couple dozen of these for one room and say, well, I need it here, 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 and here, next to every single instrument inside. They'd put multiples of these inside an incubator so they can map out the inside. Everything goes to our cloud and they can pull it via an API. So everything's automatically going to whatever data models that they're using, which you couldn't do with the traditional guys, with the traditional people who are trying to pull this data, because it goes to a PC, it goes maybe to a cloud. You have to download a CSV, you have to do all this.
Right.
So we were data first, and the SynBio folks were early adopters, and they actually drove a lot of our features because they said, well, we need this, we need that. We didn't even think about APIs out of the gate until like 3 or 4 SynBio companies said, if you got an API, we'll be a customer. So, you got it.
Awesome.
Coming right up.
This, as you showed the device, so just, a warning for everyone. I've been, since Marina is in US now, Adina is back to Florence, right? Shane and I, my younger one, we've been just binging Marvel and like Iron Man, and we went through phases. As you showed the thing, I was like, this is totally like the Iron Man Labs stuff. Collecting data constantly and
Yeah, but I want to just, I have to touch on this. Okay, so CTO, going from CTO to CEO, and then I want to then I want to hear, if you don't mind sharing. So you've hired some of the most unbelievable salespeople I've ever seen in my life. Like the woman that bought me lunch, Brooke Cody. She was off. This is unbelievable. And then you've got obviously our good buddy Mike Dillion trying to develop out your biz dev channel, like the ultimate salesman. I mean, a big thinker, but certainly quite capable of selling. And so
I'm gonna have a drink to him now.
Right.
Yeah, let's have a drink to Mike and to Brooke. But yeah, and you have to say, we have to give her, she was so, you just had someone incredibly passionate about it, the product. So are you doing correlation or causation in your data analysis of your sales cycle? How are you managing this whole organization going from CTO to CEO here?
Yeah, well, it's funny. The step from CTO to CEO was a lot greater than I ever anticipated. And I was talking to Sonny early on, and he said, he basically said, look, Sri, look at everything I was shielding you from. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. And the reason is, I'm having to look at things like budgets, finances, HR, recruiting, and even have responsibility for marketing and sales. And I'm naturally an engineer and a scientist that gravitate towards the technology side of things. So what I've had to do is I've had, out of pure necessity, had to hire people who are good at that, because that's not my forte. And so Brooke is a great example. She joined us about a month or two ago or something like that. And we have a solid sales and marketing team, and that's why Mike came on board. Was I needed somebody who I can bounce ideas off of, who can think strategically and all that on the business side. So it was very much out of a necessity that I had to build this team of people that had skills that I really didn't grow up having. I definitely understood the importance of it, but that's not my core competence. And so it's the step from CTO to CEO is not an easy one. I mean, I know I have some friends, founder friends who've done it, but for me, I'm inherently an inventor. I'm inherently a technologist, and I think you just need to recognize what your strengths are, and then recruit accordingly.
Yeah.
So Jim, do you need to ask your normal question then? Because that sounded like some awesome entrepreneurial advice, but I don't know, maybe there's more that
there's so many advice here, but what we just got to capture that you said it a couple of times in the podcast here, which is some data is better than no data.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely fascinating, and the idea that not doing anything is not putting any tracking in and not putting in any monitoring, and then accepting that it's data, right? It doesn't come with morality or an opinion. It just comes with what it collected, right? Yeah, because I find you know, I find in the data business that people almost look at it, it's like, it's not the perfect data, or it's not that this, or they, you know, that perfection is the enemy of
Exactly.
doing something.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you know, that's something that that the people that we work with, you know, they oftentimes they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what, you know, and so they just say, well, let's start with this and put something
Right.
in. And then they're like, oh, I get it. So can I also do this and this and this and this? So what we often find is the best way to show value to a customer is to start with something familiar that they know they need. You know, we made the mistake early on of trying to paint too big of a vision and say, look at all these wonderful things we could be doing.
Yeah.
And we got pulled down to earth very, very rapidly, saying, well, that's great, but and you can laugh at this. You know, we
Yeah.
laid out our whole vision, but the number of times we, you know, we you know, our potential customers at the time were saying, well, Sri, that's great. We love the vision. We love where we're going with, but if you could just give us a text message when the freezer is
Yeah.
out of range, we can change for that today. And oh my God,
Awesome.
number of times I heard this.
At least they didn't say page me.
Right.
So
Right.
some people have asked. Yes.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm
More
sure.
specifically, they said, are you integrated with PagerDuty, which is the
Right.
the killer.
Archaic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I know you're doing the time check for us, Eugene, but so just on the, so the big piece of advice, like I could sit here and listen to you all day. When you're thinking about our digital health entrepreneurs, maybe even for the CTOs turned CEOs, what's the biggest piece of advice do you give to our millions of digital health tech entrepreneurs listening to us?
So that's, you know, there's a lot of mistakes I've made I can talk about, but there's actually one bit of advice that I got. I for the life of me can't remember who said this to me, but it changed my way of thinking about entrepreneurship completely. And it was I want to say it might have been John Scully who mentioned this. I actually can't remember, but the the point was products don't change industries. Infrastructure changes industries. Infrastructure is what has the tremendous impact to change the course of how an entire industry is made. However, it's very hard to sell infrastructure. Nobody buys infrastructure. People buy products. So what you need to do is to build a product that then becomes infrastructure. And, you know, Facebook is a great example. It was a product when it came out. It was a website. You can do this, and now it is infrastructure for so many people. The iPhone, same thing. It was a product, but it's a platform. You can say platform as well, but I like the word infrastructure. And so that single piece of advice has influenced what we're doing at Elemental, you know, as an entrepreneur. But also, you know, as you know, I also wear an angel investor hat at times. So when I'm looking at other startups, it's the same thing. You know, people say platform, but I like the word infrastructure.
Right.
Are you building something that initially is a product that you can actually sell, people can get their head around, you can generate market traction and awareness, but underneath that, are you building out the building blocks for that infrastructure that allows you to make your own product 2, 3, 4, and 5, but also
But
allows
others can add in.
bingo, yes. And so
Love it.
that would be the single most important thing that I've learned is infrastructure changes markets, but nobody buys infrastructure. So make a product, turn it into infrastructure.
Love it. Love it. And I, like, that's your coach. That's Health Beacon,
Yep.
you know, right. You know, that's, you know, you make a product people can buy, and then ultimately, hopefully it becomes infrastructure that
Exactly.
people
Yeah.
need, require, and they can build off of. Beautiful.
I like your pitch, Jim. Well, on that note, that was awesome. I wish we can do that every week. And for those listeners and viewers, just hit that subscribe button and help all of us out.
Thanks,
Over and
Sridhar.
out.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you both.